Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Father-Son Packers podcast, your source for Packers news, notes, and analysis. My name is Tommy. I'm one of your hosts, and I'm joined, as always, by my co-host, my dad, Matt. Dad, how are you doing?
All right. Watched Thursday Night Football while working on the podcast. Watched the little Bucks preseason opener. It's preseason. Season opener.
Watched the Bucks and the Bucks. The little double up. Yes, a little double up.
The only thing we were missing
night.
are the Pittsburgh Pirates to get Bucks, and Bucks.
That's true. I didn't even think
know?
about that one. No,
Yeah.
I didn't know Bucks.
We could have tripled up on Bucks.
We are here today, on the evening of Thursday, October 26th, to preview the Packers' upcoming matchup against the division rival Minnesota Vikings. Got a lot to talk about here, Dad. Exciting. Maybe not super exciting after the last couple of games, but we're gonna get up for it either way. We're gonna get all of our juices flowing for this pregame, even though maybe
hope springs eternal, or despair springs eternal, or something. Something springs eternal.
We're going to keep coming back here every week, giving you pre-games and post-games with the same amount of energy.
The beatings will continue until morale improves.
Yes, and morale was low after last post-game after that loss to the Broncos.
Morale did not improve from the last game.
Not even a little, but yes, we got a lot to talk about in this preview with the Vikings matchup coming this Sunday. But before we do, just wanted to pitch a couple of things. If you like what you hear here today, come give us a follow on Twitter at FatherSonPacker. We tweet out statistics we find interesting when we have new episodes out, pieces of information in terms of like news, et cetera, articles we find interesting, videos we find interesting, pretty much one-stop shopping for everything going on in Titletown. And then come subscribe to us on your podcast platform of choice, whether that's Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify. We even put all our episodes out on YouTube as well. If you give us a subscribe there, we'd really appreciate it. It would really help our numbers. But Dad, let's get into this preview for the game. But let's start with some news and notes for the Packers. Really only one piece of news going on. Unfortunately, it is injury-related and roster-related. The Packers have placed both safety Darnell Savage and corner Eric Stokes on IR, signing corner Corey Ballantyne from the practice squad to the active roster, and then signing corner Robert Rochelle from the Panthers practice squad to the active roster. Dad, tough luck for both Savage and Stokes, but especially for Stokes because, first game back last weekend, and then just immediately hamstring injury, IR. They say they expect him to make a return at some point this year at least, but not great.
Bad enough hamstring injury to go back on IR. And what do you get? Like 4 special team snaps or something like that?
Yeah,
that really sucks.
I don't know why. I don't know why he's a gunner on the punt team when he has a bad hamstring and a bad leg, but here we are.
I was thinking about this today. I was like, giving the coaching staff a hard time about why would you do this? And I'm thinking, as a corner, he'd also have to sprint downfield.
I guess, but he's getting warmed
either
up.
Either way, it's like
because when you're a gunner on the punt team, and you're on defense, you've been on the bench and you're coming off the bench cold into a dead sprint for 50 yards. Just like
it seemed like a bad idea.
Yeah, and it's easy to say that when the result is this. It's a bit of like, kind of just going based on, what happened, and maybe
I could say it was a bad idea even if it didn't get hurt and just say you lucked out.
Yeah, it's true. I know. It's just not great. And then Savage on IR, looks like Jonathan Owens is going to start in his place. And then let's move on to the injury report, Dad, since we're already kind of talking about some injuries. It's pretty lengthy for the Packers, and that's part of the reason that they... I know.
Yeah.
And it's part of the reason that they decided to add 2 corners to the active roster is that Jair Alexander is day-to-day, Matt LaFleur said. But let's just read off the injury report. This is Thursday, so we don't have officially out, questionable, etc. designations, but we do have their practice participations. For the Vikings, we'll start off with them. They only have 4 players on the report. First is Brian Asamoah, linebacker who has not participated Wednesday or Thursday with an ankle injury. Second is Ezra Cleveland, one of their starting guards with a foot injury, was limited both Wednesday and Thursday. TJ Hawkinson, tight end, also with a foot injury, didn't participate in practice on Wednesday, although that was an estimation. They didn't have an official practice that day. And he was a limited participant on Thursday, so he's trending up. And then Jalen Naylor, wide receiver, hamstring injury, limited both Wednesday and Thursday. Packers, on the other hand, this one's going to take a little bit longer. Jair Alexander, like we said, Matt LaFleur said he's day-to-day with that back injury that kept him out of the last game. He was limited on Wednesday, but then he didn't practice on Thursday, so that's going to be something to keep an eye on. Zane Anderson, safety with a hamstring injury, full participant both Wednesday and Thursday. Devontae Campbell, linebacker, ankle, limited on both Wednesday and Thursday. It sounds like there's optimism that he's going to make his return this week, which would be good for the Packers. Elton Jenkins with knee injury, limited both Wednesday and Thursday. Aaron Jones, hamstring, didn't participate in practice on Wednesday, but was a limited participant on Thursday. Luke Musgrave, ankle injury, didn't participate in practice on Wednesday or Thursday, and based on some quotes that Matt LaFleur had about Tucker Kraft having to be ready to go, it kind of sounds like there is not a whole lot of optimism with him being ready for this weekend. Josh Myers, ankle injury, didn't participate in practice on Wednesday, was limited on Thursday. Remember, he sustained this injury in the last game, had to come out for a little bit. They moved Zach Tom to center, and then he came back in. So if Myers were to miss this game, expect Tom to move to center, I would imagine. Josh Nyman, tackle, knee injury, limited both Wednesday and Thursday. Preston Smith popped up on Thursday with an illness. He was not listed on the injury report on Wednesday, but did not participate in practice on Thursday. Hopefully there's not something going around because the Packers could ill afford, pun intended, to be missing more players this weekend. Christian Watson, wide receiver, knee injury, full participant both Wednesday and Thursday, which is some really good news because there was some speculation that he might miss this week, and it'll be good to have him back. Devontae Wyatt, also pretty good news, the fact that he was a limited participant Wednesday and Thursday, given the fact that he was carted off on Sunday, and I was kind of worried for him. But remember, he was also questionable coming into the game last week, so it sounds like that same knee has been bugging him, but at least it's nothing major. Dad, that was a long one again. Any thoughts?
So, I say the Jair news is kind of worrisome since he went backwards. We do have some players trending in a better direction. Like the Wyatt and Watson thing, I think people were expecting multiple weeks for them, of it being carted off and the way Watson looked after them. People were speculating that he might miss a couple of weeks. And then he went straight to full participation. The Preston, well, that's just illness, so hopefully it doesn't last too long. Myers is trending in the right direction, going from DNP to limited, and Aaron Jones as well. We'll see, though. We had this like DNP limited, bouncing back and forth for quite a long time now.
Yeah, it's
Campbell's improving to make a big difference in the defense if he's able to be in there. The difference between him and McDuffie is large.
Yeah, I think McDuffie's been okay. He's
been fine. He's done, I think, all that we could expect of him, and probably a little bit more, because his tackling has been relatively good. But he's
just not as good a player.
He's just not as good a player as Campbell is.
Yeah, and he's small. He's smaller, and he's not as good a player. But yeah, I would just want to say, like, I feel like McDuffie's done a pretty good job. The only thing I was going to ask was, Jair Alexander out. Do you think they go Carrington Valentine or Corey Ballantyne in this next game at corner if Jair doesn't play, that is?
I'm guessing they'll go Ballantyne.
I'm thinking so too. Corey Valentine is a very sorry, not Corey Valentine. Carrington Valentine had a pretty rough go of it against the Broncos. He had a really good preseason, but I think they might be going Valentine in this next one.
They were going after him intentionally.
Yeah, Cortland Sutton was giving him a lot of problems on the outside. And, he's a rookie 7th-round pick. I almost feel like they should go Valentine because, to me, right now, they're already playing a worse player in Rasheed Walker over Josh Nyman for development purposes. If you're going to do that there, might as well just do it other places too. I mean, I don't know.
They're not being consistent.
No. Yeah, and so I would imagine Valentine, but the fact that they signed Ballantyne and Rochelle to the active roster, I think maybe they weren't exactly super happy with how Carrington Valentine played in this last game. That Ballantyne thing is going to be so tough for audio platforms, like just the rest of the year.
It's a good thing we don't have an Anthony Johnson on the same team as well.
Not yet. Practice squad doesn't count. If we say Anthony Johnson, assume we're talking about the one on the active roster until they're both there. But yeah, so that's
he'll probably get elevated. The other one will probably get elevated this week. Just to
probably
we'll have Valentine, Johnson, and Johnson all on the field at the same time.
They might need the corners, honestly. They definitely could. But that has been the injury report for the Packers and the Vikings. It's not great. But let's move into the rest of the... Oh, and the other thing, actually, I forgot to mention is for the Vikings, remember that Justin Jefferson will still be on IR for this game. So he's not in the injury report, but he won't be playing. Which is
Joe Barry asked just to make sure. Hey, is Justin Jefferson still in IR?
He was like, he's still in the IR, right? It's like, okay, thank goodness. But yeah, that'll at least make this matchup a little bit easier. But Dad, let's get into this matchup and talk a bit about it. For the meat of our game preview, and let's start with some quick facts. This game will be in Green Bay, noon local time. and it honestly might be kind of miserable out. According to the Weather Channel, it is supposed to be a nice 42 degrees with a 24% chance of precipitation. So that's pretty...
Weather's going south fast, isn't it? Wasn't it like in the 70s?
Well, do you hear what Rich Bisaccia said today about the weather?
No, I missed it.
He said, one thing I've learned being in Green Bay is if you don't like the weather, wait 5 minutes because it'll change.
It'll change. I've heard that said about Wisconsin in the past.
But yes, so not...
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
the high's going to drop like 30 degrees maybe since yesterday till Sunday.
Yeah, it's supposed to be cold and possibly rainy. Well, 42 isn't cold, but if it rains, it's going to be miserable. But yeah, and then Vikings are favored by 1.5 points. With an over-under of 41.5, so an implied result of around 21-20 Vikings. So yeah, favored in Lambeau, not entirely surprising after the past 2 games for the Packers have not been totally inspiring. But Dad, let's go into the rest of our preview and start with keeping up with the Joneses, not talking about Aaron and Caleb, and this is just kind of how the season has been going for the Vikings so far. For the season, they are 3-4, second in the NFC North. They started 0-3, but have won 3 of their last 4, including an impressive win last week on Monday Night Football against the 49ers. So, maybe coming in and having a letdown game after a pretty big win, hopefully. They are coming in on slightly lesser rest as well. They overall have a point differential of just -1. They're averaging -1 total on the year.
Not average. Sorry. The -1 is total number of points.
Total number of points.
I see.
Total point differential of -1 on the year. They're averaging about 21.6 points per game on offense and allowing 21.7 points per game on defense, which is probably why you thought it was -0.1. On offense by DVOA, they are 14th overall, 14th for the pass, 24th for running the football. So pretty average offense with a below average run offense. And then on defense by DVOA, they are 15th overall, 16th against the pass, and 12th against the run. So, kind of right about middle of the pack.
Does it get any more middle of the pack than those numbers?
They could have had
Talk about an average team.
They could have had a more middle of the pack run offense. Their run offense
their run offense is low.
Yeah,
this is true.
But pretty middle of the pack.
They're on the lower side of meh.
Yeah, but we're on the lower side of lower
We're looking up at meh.
Yeah, we are right now. It's not great. But that's kind of keeping up with the Joneses. That's just a brief overview of what's going on with the Vikings. But let's move into some more descriptive sections. And let's start with Hey Now, Play Nice, which I know is your favorite. Say something nice about the Vikings. They like I said, they just came off a pretty good win. Their other wins are against the Panthers and the Bears, so not as inspiring. But beating the Niners on Monday night is pretty impressive. And they kind of took it to the Niners a little bit. But, Dad, what are some things that you can say nice about the Vikings? I know it's extra hard when it's a division rival.
So, it says, I think they still have some good weapons on offense, even with Jefferson out. So, Jordan Addison, the rookie, really broke out against San Francisco with 7 catches on 10 targets for 123 yards and 2 touchdowns. Right now, he's 4th in the league among rookie wide receivers with 400 yards receiving, and he's 1st among rookie wide receivers with 6 TDs. Hawkinson, their tight end that they got from Detroit, is 2nd in the league among tight ends with 47 receptions and 390 yards, trailing only Travis Kelce for both of those stats. And I think their running back pass catching is also starting to maybe round form. So it kind of depends on what they do. Right now, Akers seems to be taking more of the work from Alexander Madison. This past week, Akers had 27 snaps to Madison's 37, and 2 weeks ago, Akers only had 9 to Madison's 45. Now, Akers has the 3rd best running back receiving grade per PFF for all running backs with at least 5 catches. And then, I guess his backup, Ty Chandler, is just behind him at 4th best. And they may continue to get more work as pass-catching backs, meaning there'll be more of a problem for the Packers to cover as receivers if they take more work from Madison, who has 5 drops on the season.
Ooh,
which may mean that his playing time will continue to drop.
Yeah, definitely don't want to see 5 drops from your running back when they're not even getting that many targets.
I think that they have actually, even without Jefferson, they have good pass catchers at receiver, tight end, and running back that they'll be able to spread the ball around to.
Yeah, the positive that I had was also on the offensive side of the ball, and that was that their offensive line is quite good, especially at tackle. They're coming off a game against a pretty vaunted Niners defensive line where they didn't allow a single sack on the evening. Christian Darrisaw, their left tackle, is the number 1 overall graded offensive lineman at any position by PFF. He is 5th in run blocking amongst all offensive linemen and 2nd in pass blocking amongst all offensive linemen, playing at least 50% of snaps is the cutoff. He has allowed only 11 pressures and only 1 sack through 6 games, although he has allowed a league-high 7 hits, which is just something to think about there. But, overall, he's been very good this year for them. Brian O'Neill, their right tackle, is PFF's 8th highest graded tackle, 3rd amongst qualifying tackles in run blocking, 22nd amongst qualifying tackles in pass blocking. He's allowed just 14 pressures and 1 sack through 7 games. And then Ezra Cleveland.
Can I just throw one more little thing in there?
Sure.
And then by ESPN, O'Neill is their number 1 offensive tackle for pass block win rate.
Yeah, they got some good
ESPN
bookends.
Metrics.
They've got some quality bookends right now. And then Ezra Cleveland, their guard who we talked about is on the injury report, is PFF's 9th highest graded guard on the year, 8th highest graded run blocking, 10th highest graded pass blocking. So they've got some decent offensive linemen coming through, especially on those edges. And we kind of saw it in that game against San Francisco where they were able to keep Kirk clean for most of the game. But that's hey now, play nice. Let's move on to some things where this next section is I'm nervous about blank. And this is kind of where we talk about some things that the Vikings might do well that are specifically maybe problematic for the Packers to deal with. And I'll throw it over to you to go first. Go ahead and take this over.
Okay, so some vulnerabilities. So right now, by DVOA, Green Bay is 29th in the league in covering wide receiver ones, and 22nd in covering running backs as pass catchers. So the Vikings may.
Are we sure we're that good? This is kind of high.
Well, I didn't actually look to see who's behind us in that ranking. Maybe it's like Prairie View A&M or something.
Yeah,
I don't know who they've included in this ranking. But those are 2 areas where we're just talking about the Vikings have some strengths even without Jefferson. So 2 areas where I think, especially if Addison continues his hot play, the Vikings may be able to exploit the Packers' defense. When you compare that, his big week last week came against San Francisco, who is 9th best in covering wide receiver ones. And I think we could say that, safe to say that Addison was their wide receiver 1 last week while Jefferson's out, and seems to be trending in that direction for the foreseeable future until Jefferson comes back.
Yeah, one thing on the Addison totals from last week is a lot of that did come on one play, but
yes,
those
one
60-yarder. Yeah, those one plays do still count. They go in the box score, but just something to keep in mind.
They're yards you need to gain to get to the end zone.
Yep, and he scored a touchdown on that play, so it was the swing in the game.
And he ripped it away from the defender.
Yeah, but just something to keep in mind.
So I'm going to give that one to Addison and not to Cousins.
Fair enough.
Touchdown for Addison, but not a touchdown for Cousins. Plus, the other thing is that just thinking about the pass catchers in general, Minnesota also, that Hockenson had a big game against San Francisco as well. It was 125 yards or something. I can't remember the number. Despite going against San Francisco, who is the 2nd best by DVOA in covering tight ends, in contrast to Green Bay, who's 13th. So that doesn't exactly bode well either.
Yeah, he was giving their linebackers, who are probably the best linebacker duo in the country, I don't know why I said it like NCAA football, in the league, in Fred Warner and Dre Greenlaw. Although Dre Greenlaw was playing a little bit hurt, but he was giving them fits. They were having a really hard time guarding him.
Yeah. So another thing, should I do mine? Or you want to? I'll keep going because I got
go ahead and finish them up, and I'll say mine.
I'll run through. Also, I'm worried about whoever is in the slot against Keyshawn Nixon. Last game, Powell lined up for the Minnesota the most in the slot with 26, had a receiving grade of 75, and Hockenson and Addison were next with 10 and 9 snaps each, and they both had receiving grades over 80. While Nixon's coverage grade in the slot is below average at 58.9 for the year, and his tackling grade for the year is a abysmal 28.7.
Oh, that's pretty rough.
So I'm a little worried about him getting burned and then giving up yak. Green Bay is also 3rd to last by DVOA in covering deep passes, And Cousins currently has a perfect passer rating of 158.3 to the deep center, probably because of that 60-yard touchdown he threw to he ended up getting to Addison. And so that's even more worrisome, I think, with Savage out.
Yeah. I have not been particularly inspired in the snaps I've seen from Owens in preseason, at least. I was not particularly inspired.
So, and then the other thing, but though I will say on the plus of that, I don't think Cousins throws deep very often. So, to counter that, his ADOT is only 27th in the league at average depth of target at 7.7 yards. So maybe even if we're weak, we won't have to, face it that many times. We'll see.
Fingers crossed, because it's going to be there for him, I think, if he wants it. For me, or did you have anything else?
I've still got more.
You're very nervous, it sounds like.
Minnesota's run blocking against Green Bay's run D. By PFF, Minnesota is number 1 in run blocking, though they're only 12th in ESPN's run block win rate. Now, if you compare this to Green Bay's run defense, they're 20th by PFF and 21st in run stop win rate by ESPN. So, and then another running metric by DVOA, Minnesota is second in adjusted line yards on offense, while Green Bay is 26th in defensive adjusted line yards. So
I can't imagine how long this nervous section is going to be when we play the Chiefs. I mean, my goodness, like we might be here for an hour. But yeah, there's a lot of matchups, and I mean, there's a reason Minnesota is favored on the road against Green Bay. Like that they are matching up well against the Packers.
They have
in a lot
some
of ways.
Strengths against some of our weaknesses, but they're not a good team. I mean, they're an unbalanced team.
Yeah.
You might notice that all of the things I'm nervous about had nothing to do with Minnesota's defense.
Well, mine actually does, interestingly enough, is Minnesota's defense. And specifically, what I am nervous about is the way that Brian Flores is currently coordinating this defense. He's a very good defensive coordinator, and I'm just worried about him being able to cause confusion for Love. He's coaching his ass off right now in terms of doing more with less. And he's really switching it up a lot. So this is according to Ben Solak of The Ringer on the podcast Extra Point Taken, which is a great podcast that everyone should listen to. But currently, the Vikings lead the league in rush 7 rate, rush 6 rate, and rush 5 rate. And they lead the league in percentage of snaps rushing with a defensive back in the rush. So they are blitzing a ton. They are sending the house all the time. They're sending people from everywhere.
So,
but...
lots of corner blitzes and safety blitzes.
Lots of corner blitzes, lots of safety blitzes. Like we said, leading the league in sending defensive backs, or percentage of snaps sending defensive backs, and leading the league in sending extra guys. But interestingly enough, they also lead the league in rush 3, drop 8. So
they never rush 4?
I guess never. They must never rush 4 because they're either sending extra guys or dropping everyone into coverage. And it gave Brock Purdy of San Francisco a lot of problems. He was not seeing the field well in that game. And just the variety with which that Brian Flores is dialing up the defense right now, I could see causing Love problems because they're bringing these guys up to the line and then they're dropping them all back, or they're sending them from everywhere. They're sending them from depth. It's the type of defense where he's like pulling a lot of levers right now, and it's probably going to be hard for a young quarterback to keep up with. And in terms of what that specifically means for the Packers, this is according to Connor Allen on Twitter. Amongst 34 qualifying quarterbacks, Jordan Love against the blitz is 31st in completion percentage, 33rd in adjusted completion rate, and 21st in yards per attempt. So he has not been great against the blitz this year. So that is something that I am a bit nervous about, the way that they're dialing up that defense in terms of it being a lot of varied looks, which might be complex for a first-year quarterback to be dealing with. Dad, let's move on, though, to our next section, which might be a little bit cheerier. And that's exploitable weaknesses of the Vikings. They're not a perfect team. Like we said, they started 0-3. Besides the win against the Niners, their other 2 wins, the Panthers and Bears, are not particularly inspiring. But, Dad, what do you think some weaknesses that the Vikings have that the Packers could maybe pick at?
Okay, so overall, their interior offensive line is not as good as their 2 offensive tackles. As you mentioned, they're both highly rated for their blocking at their bookends. Ingram at right guard, in particular, seems to be the weak link in pass pro with only a 34.4 PFF grade in pass blocking in true pass sets. So I think either Kenny Clark or Wyatt, if he plays, should be able to get pressure on passing downs from the inside. Minnesota's also 20th in defending pass-catching running backs. So if Jones can play, I think he can have a good day. And Minnesota's also not good at defending the deep part of the field, according to DVOA on FTNFantasy.com. They're 20th in the league at defending the past, I think, 20 yards. And Love is second in the league in average depth of target at 9.8 yards. So they could be susceptible to some deep shots to Watson or Wicks or Reed. Those would be the guys that I'd like to see the deep shots to. Anyway.
Yeah, especially with it seeming like Musgrave is not going to play. For me, I also had exploitable weaknesses on the defense of the Vikings, and it's mostly just that their defense lacks talent. I can say all I want about how Brian Flores is coaching a very good defense right now, but they just don't have a lot of horses back there. Specifically, their outside corners have been really struggling, Byron Murphy and Caleb Evans. Pretty rough per PFF. They're currently allowing a 72% completion percentage into their coverage, 51 receptions on 71 targets. They're allowing 11.8 yards per reception and 8.45 yards per target, which is really not good. 6 penalties and just 3 pass breakups between them on the year is also really rough. So there's some weaknesses to be exploited there on the outside. And then you can move the ball against them, which is kind of shown by the success rate allowed. This is per RBSDM.com. They're 24th in the league in overall success rate allowed, right behind the Packers actually at 23rd. 24th in dropback success rate and 24th in rushing success rate. They do also have the 10th most missed tackles in the league per PFF. And then according to teamrankings.com, they have the 25th ranked third down conversion rate allowed. So you can move the ball against them. You can get success on the ground and in the passing game. You can kind of churn out yards. And then if they get you into third down, they're not exactly great at getting you off the field on third down. So there's certainly some exploitable weaknesses in the Vikings defense, and specifically their defensive personnel. But Dad, let's move on to our next section, which is I hope the Packers blank. I can see you've been clicking and clacking and adding a few things to this.
Yeah, but no,
I'm glad that you're thinking of more hopeful things. It sounds like you're about to delete it though.
Yeah, I'm gonna. That's not
wishful thinking. No,
yeah,
not going to happen. All right. Well, tell us what you are hopeful for in this game. Or sorry, not hopeful. What do you hope the Packers do? How do you hope that they approach this game?
So I'm thinking about how can they turn their first halves into how they're playing in the second half. And so some of that is to, I think, run more play action, I think, early in the game to try to jumpstart the offense. I think to try to get other things. Okay, I think they need to play with a little more tempo. I think one thing is they get kind of bogged down in the first half, and then when they fall behind, they pick up the pace and play faster. I think they do better. So it seems to be working later in the game, and maybe have some not quite so slow developing plays, or just get and maybe do a little bit more no huddle to keep the defense on the field, not let them switch and look for mismatches. That's sort of a general schematic thing. In terms of some individual play calling, I'd like to see them target Reed deep on some slot fades. He hasn't had that much opportunity, but his PFF grade on the deep right, for example, is elite. And Minnesota's primary slot corner, Byron Murphy, has a coverage grade of only 50.8 and a tackling grade of only 29.9.
Have they had Byron Murphy in the slot? I thought the listing that I had, the depth chart I was looking at on ESPN, had him outside most of the time. But if PFF has him taking more of his snaps inside, that'd be an interesting check that I would want to
let me just double check on that, because that's what I was.
Sure.
While you want to continue, while I check that, why don't you go on to what yours are? I'll double check, make sure I got this right.
Yeah, mine also is kind of thematically similar to wanting better production in the first half, but specifically it's about allowing Love to throw downfield. And we talked a little bit about this in the post game from the Broncos when we were just crying our eyes out, I guess. But in the first game,
crying our eyes out, gouging our eyes out, that game was kind of ugly.
A little column A, a little column B. At least we don't need to watch it anymore. But the first half of the game against the Broncos, I just felt like they came out super tight with the play calling, just a 2.4 average depth of target for Love, which led to an extremely poor negative .282 EPA per play and a 28.6% success rate, which are both abysmal. And then in the second half, they actually opened it up a lot and had an average depth of target of 10.1 yards, which corresponded to a vastly improved .291 EPA per play and a success rate of 54.5%. So just let him throw the ball. Just let him throw it downfield. I don't no, I don't understand what the game plan was against the Broncos in the first half. Just throw it out. Get rid of it. It was not working. It was bad. It was miserable. But yeah, so that's the main thing that I'm hoping for in this game is just let him sink or swim. Just let him rip it. Actually dial up some dropbacks. He was despite how much he struggled at times in that Broncos game, although overall I thought he had an okay game. He was very good on play action, which, like you said, I would like to see them use more. I think he was like 9 of 9 for, I forget how many yards on play action. Zach Cruz has a tweet about it that we've retweeted. I forget exactly, but 100% completion percentage on play action passes against Denver. Let's just do a little bit more of that. Let's make it a little easier for Love, because I feel like at times it looks so difficult for the whole offense. And part of it's just players are not executing. Like, you have third downs where guys are running the route to the same place and one of them messes up, and it's just messy. But you got to go down swinging. You can't be afraid to fail in just doing these little dump off passes and just going nowhere and scoring 0 points against one of the worst defenses in the league in the first half. I mean, like, it could not be worse is pretty much what I'm saying, like, in terms of how their first half performances have gone. So at least try something. Don't be afraid to take risks throwing it downfield. Don't be so tight.
They're afraid to let Love play in the last game. And I don't know if they got an overcorrection. Yeah, so when I was looking up, it turns out that while among corners, Murphy has played the most in the slot among their listed cornerbacks, but actually most of the slot snaps are taken by their safeties.
Right? It's been Wanham, right? A lot.
I think it was Cam Bynum and Josh Metellus.
Okay. Have taken the most slot snaps?
Have taken the most slot snaps. Though Metellus also has the most
right. Wanham's one of their
free safety.
I don't know what I was thinking. I think Wanham's one of their edge rushers. I'm mixing up players. But do you want to finish what you were talking about?
But I do think there's a chance. Well, I was going to take about swiftly. I think if Murphy's lined up on him, because he's a lot faster than Murphy as well. I didn't get a chance now to look up how fast Bynum and Metellus are. But I think there's a chance but they're weak on that part of the field anyway. I think no matter who seems to be covering it. So I think there's an opportunity there. I also want to see Love get more freedom to change the play at the line. I thought it was particularly damning of LaFleur when he said after the game that they had play calls for the run in the beginning of the game, and they expected a certain defense from the Broncos because of the alignment they were going to be in. They thought they'd be a nickel, I think. And when they weren't in the defense that they were planning on, they didn't have a mechanism to get out of the play. Basically, he admitted he got out-coached.
Yeah.
In the game. So they were prepared to do anything different. So I think they have to give Love a little more freedom to change the play. It's like, oh, well, this play's a disaster. It's never going to work. But I have no option, so I guess we're going to run it.
Yeah.
I would like to avoid that situation, please.
Yeah, I don't think you and I are kind of on the same page where it's like, I feel like they just need to let Love play actual real life adult quarterback. And if he's bad, he's bad.
It's time to take the training wheels off. Yeah, besides, you want to be able to evaluate him anyway, right?
Exactly. Like,
take the training wheels off and let him go around and sling it. They keep telling him he needs to just let it rip.
Yeah, and you just gotta let him sink or swim. Like, we're not. What are we getting out of these, like, the first half
1 yard passes?
Yeah, we're not getting out of this.
Or running into an 8-man box or whatever.
Yeah, no one is benefiting from this. And Love plays better when he's allowed to throw it a bit more downfield.
This is what happens. I think they fall behind. It's like, okay, well, I got no options but to let him try to sling it to make a comeback, and that's when we play our best offensive football. Yeah. So why don't you do that from the beginning? And how about we try? You know what? Let's try a novel concept. It's called learning. You see something work better, and then you do it more often.
And yes, he's made mistakes, like that pick against the Broncos, bad pick. Some of the picks against the Raiders, bad picks. But at the same time, it's like, he's a first-year starting quarterback. He's going to have some bad throws. It is what it is. Like, let him. Don't be afraid of failure. You're going to fail anyways if you do that. But, Dad, let's move on to our next segment. And let's talk about don't take your eye off that guy, which is either players we think that will be standouts in this game, players that we think will have massive impacts on this game, one way or the other. Who did you have for this one?
So what I wrote down in here were the safeties, particularly whoever is lined up deep, considering Cousins' success throwing to the deep middle of the field. Jonathan Owens is the likely second safety based on snap count so far this year. If it's not him, then whoever's there, keep an eye on whoever's lining up deep as the free safety there. So far this year, his tackling grade has been very good, but his coverage grade is not as good. So he needs to be able to hold up in support and not let the Vikings get a deep score up the middle like they did against San Francisco. So he's somebody I would say watch whoever's playing free safety, whether it's Owens or Ford or whoever else they put in there.
Yeah, for me, I think that's a very good one because, the safety position already wasn't the strongest. I think they had been exceeding our expectations, and we're starting to lose
Ford
starters.
has had a pretty good year. But,
and Savage has been fine. I think he's
Savage
fine.
has had a better year than last year.
Yes, we'll say that. Better year than last year. For me, though, the player that I'm keeping my eye on is Kenny Clark. So since Garrett Bradbury, the Vikings starting center, was drafted in 2019, has gotten to Minnesota, Kenny has kind of abused that matchup and has had a lot of his best performances against Minnesota, and these are per PFF. In the 7 games where Clark has played at least 30 snaps against the Vikings since 2019, he's averaging 4 pressures, half a sack, and 2 stops a game, which are all above his normal averages over that span. So he has some of his better games against Minnesota. And oftentimes he is wrecking that interior, which is kind of something that you talked about in terms of a weakness for them. But yeah, so he's someone that I'm keeping my eye on because I think if he has a good game, that could kind of lay the pathway and lay the foundation to the Packers actually being able to maybe win this game. Dad, what do you think? Kenny, I feel like, what do you think about how Kenny has played this year? I guess is my question. He hasn't been as good this year. He hasn't
had that many splash plays, and I do remember games where he's just abusing the interior offensive lineman in Minnesota. I was going to add, I thought about, but it went for a little bit more variety of throwing Wyatt in here too. Might be his chance to really take advantage of his strength as an interior pass rusher. And Minnesota is a pass-heavy team. Yeah. So there'll be more pass rush plays where I think
assuming we can keep it close. Is the caveat there?
But will they stop? Will they stop passing?
If they're up by a lot, I would imagine so. We got to not get annihilated in the first half. Remember, I think are we at 63-6 over the last 4 games in the first half since the Lions game? I think it's not great.
Oh, did that include the Broncos game? Maybe it did.
Yes, it did. It was only 9-0 at half. It barely mattered. But yeah, no, we're getting crushed in the first half. It was only
an infinite number of times as many points as we had.
Yeah, I mean, the point is we're losing these first halves to really bad teams. The Vikings aren't a great team, but they're not Broncos, Raiders, or Packers level bad. Apparently, we need to be mentioned. Apparently, in that same sentence.
We need to be mentioned with the Broncos and Raiders.
And they might take offense to that.
As in we couldn't beat either one of them
with the bye in the middle. It's so bad. I still think about it.
All I will say is they were on the road.
I guess.
And Denver has never, ever started 0-4 at home.
The first time for everything. That's such a random tidbit. The fact they were 0-3 at home is, I mean,
it already shows they're bad this year.
The question is, what percentage of the times they went 0-3 at home did they, I guess never. So 0%. But how many times they actually go 0-3 at home, I guess is my question. But no, yeah.
Right. There may be only 3 times that was ever even a possibility.
Exactly. So it's whatever, But either way, Packers down in the dumps. Vikings, not a great team, but better than us. Dad, let's move to overtime, though.
When I hear down in the dumps, it's are we in the trash compactor in Star Wars?
They make it out of there. I hope so. I hope we are. They actually get out of there.
That'd be good. That'd be good news. They get out of there before they get crushed.
No, we're just that weird little serpent monster
with that little
snake,
that little one-eyed little garbage monster swimming around in there.
We live in the filth. We are becoming the trash. It's have you seen Toy Story 4? We're getting really off topic.
Trash.
You're trash, like me. But yeah, no, that's the Packers right now to the Broncos, or that was the Broncos to the Packers, and now we're trash.
I'm not feeling quite so warm and cozy with trash as Forky was in Toy Story 4. I hate to say this feeling that we're trash is not a cozy feeling.
No, we're Woody. The Broncos were Forky, and they were like, trash. Yeah, we're trash. But no, let's move on to our next segment, though, which is Overtime, where we just kind of discuss some things that maybe we didn't get a chance to talk about in that previous segment, or any of our previous segments, things that didn't quite fit. For me, one thing that we just hadn't gotten a chance to mention is Danielle Hunter for the Vikings currently leads the league in sacks with 9 of them. He's only 19th in the league in pressures per PFF, but it is something to keep an eye on and someone to keep an eye on.
Converting at a high rate.
A very high rate, yeah.
And is he still going to be on the Vikings? Is he still going to be on the Vikings by Sunday?
That's a very good question. If they want to trade him before Sunday, the thing is they're 3-4. It's not like they're blowing it up now. Like
I know it's too bad. If they had lost the last game, maybe they would be.
I almost am happy they're not blowing it up because they're not going anywhere. I mean, it's fine. Don't let them get picks.
They're not really going at it.
Who cares?
Just stay mediocre in the middle.
Yeah, 7 wins is fine. Like whatever, But no, so that's something I'm keeping an eye on. That we
are you saying we're not? That's not where we're headed.
7 wins feels like a stretch, although our schedule is not very hard. Our schedule might be a little too easy because we
were given a really good schedule this year.
Yeah,
and we just cannot take advantage of it. So
mean,
far.
That's the thing. Is like I look at him, it's like, wow, we should really win these games, and then I have to be like, you lost to the Raiders and the Broncos back-to-back weeks. There are no games that should be considered gimmies. No game is a gimme anymore. But no, so that's the thing that I'm keeping my eye on that I didn't get a chance to talk about. Where he lines up, Zach Tom against him or Rasheed Walker against him. I'm a little more worried about Walker. But Dad, what is something that you didn't get a chance to mention yet that you wanted to talk about?
So I'm going with something like pretty random. Minnesota is currently 10th in the league, giving up the 10th most rushing yards to quarterbacks. So maybe Love can convert a couple more long runs against the Vikings. We're going for, and I think they've been actually doing it intentionally a little bit more the last couple of weeks. There were definitely a designed run or two.
They ran a couple
recently.
Quarterback draws with various success against the Broncos. One was that holding play that Elton had. It almost worked.
It got a lot of yards.
No, it didn't. It went for 4 yards.
Well, I mean, no.
That one only went for 4. Yeah, that one was nothing. They had another one that was a bit more successful. But no, the Elton holding one only ended up going for like 4 yards.
Didn't get... Yeah, okay.
But not great.
You're right, because it was going to be just short.
Or third and 6.
But only like 2 yards away from... But only 2 yards away from field goal range.
Yeah.
That was the thing. It was actually, put us still on schedule.
Yeah.
To get a field goal. That's right. That's why I felt good about that play until we got the -10. Yeah, and then it all just went right down the crapper.
Not great, Bob. But yeah, that hold was brutal. But Dad, let's start wrapping things up here. We've kind of talked about all the things we really wanted to. But let's hit the bottom line. Dad, the Vikings win if blank.
So what I have is like the Packers can't stick with Addison deep. If they can't stick with Addison deep, then it's going to be a very long day on defense, and the Vikings could really run up a high score if he's running free in the secondary.
Yeah, for me,
and part of that is whether or not Jair can play or not.
Yeah, I don't hate Douglas on him. I think Douglas could possibly handle that assignment, but we don't really have corners travel, so it's not like we would be able to.
Douglas is having a pretty good year, I feel like.
Yeah. For me,
maybe does that hold up to the eye test anyway? Looking at the numbers, I should say my general impression is
I feel like Douglas is having a pretty good year, except for that Lions game, which he struggled. Yeah. For me,
85.6 coverage grade.
It's not bad.
Elite, near elite coverage grade for the season.
For me, the Vikings win if the Packers can't force turnovers. I think that's like the only way the Packers do win this game is if they just destroy the turnover battle. They've only forced 5 turnovers on the year, which is pretty bad. They're not making many plays on the ball. But that's kind of how I could see the Vikings win. I mean, I just don't see many avenues for the Packers in this one. But, Dad, the Packers win if blank.
So, basically, I'm thinking about creating turnovers. So far this season, Cousins has 7 turnover-worthy plays basically one per game, but only 5 interceptions. In contrast to Love's 7 turnover-worthy plays, and he has 7 interceptions.
So you're saying he's due, is what you're saying.
Right. Just like a slot machine.
Exactly.
It's or I've flipped heads 10 times in a row. It's got to be tails, right?
Very due for tails. Yes, 100%.
Very due for tails. It's going to happen.
Regression of the mean.
Those. It's not an independent. If anything, it's the opposite. If you got 10 heads in a row, it's more likely to come up with heads the next time than tails.
Oh yeah,
there's something wrong. There's
clearly
something
wrong
fishy
with
about that coin.
Wow,
exactly. That coin is fishy.
The math doesn't make sense. But anyway, I
think
they need to force turnovers.
If Green Bay wins
Cousins.
the turnover, I think if Green Bay wins the turnover battle, I think they'll win.
I think they need to win it by like 2 or 3 to win this game. Honestly, I think they need to like dramatically.
But
win
just
the
remember,
battle.
they've been losing the turnover battle and losing games. So if they win the turnover battle, that's a big difference.
But they have not been playing teams that are any good. The Vikings are substantially better than the Raiders or Broncos.
I'd say they're substantially better than the Broncos. I don't know if they're substantially better than the Raiders.
The Raiders are terrible. The Raiders are horrendous. They barely beat us and we threw 3 picks. Like barely beat us, and they had the turnover margin on us by 2, I think. And they barely beat us. Yeah, no, I don't think the Raiders.
Right.
Are
So if we don't lose the turnover battle so bad, we win.
Yeah, nah.
So if we don't lose the turnover battle so bad, we win.
For me, the Packers win if Kenny and Wyatt can melt the interior of the line and make Cousins uncomfortable in the pocket. I think they need to get pressure on Cousins, which kind of ties into what you're saying about him turning the ball over. I don't think he's just going to turn the... Well, actually, we've seen Cousins sometimes just turn the ball over on his own, but I think they're going to need pressure to really make him make those mistakes in order to give the offense a chance with some good field position.
And just to give a little context to that, under pressure, Cousins' PFF passing grade drops from an 88.1 when he's not pressured to 61 when he is pressured.
Yeah. I mean, they just got to... And the thing is, like, he looked pretty good under pressure against the Niners, but yeah.
Every once in a while, he'll have one of those games. He did it to us a couple of years ago where we're getting pressure and he still was making completions.
Yeah, he was cooking out of his mind in that Niners game.
It doesn't happen every time. Sometimes he gets pressure and he falls apart. It's a little bit high variance.
Yeah, you just got to get pressure on him and hope for the best. But, Dad, this is kind of wrapping up our preview for this Sunday game against the Vikings. And let's end it off with a score prediction. What do you got for us?
So I could see I'm a little more optimistic than you, but I'm going for Green Bay 24, winning the game 24-21. So Minnesota is scoring right on their median score, which is a little bit, just barely more than Green Bay's defensive median. So their points kind of make sense. So they get about 21. The hard part, of course, is getting 24 points out of our offense right now. But I'm going Green Bay 24-21. We're at home. We're coming back home. We're going to win. It's time to turn it around.
We want the ball and we're going to score, as Matt Hasselbeck once said.
Oh, that worked out so well.
Yeah, I know, right? For me, I got it 24-14 Minnesota. I think the Packers are spiraling right now, and Minnesota, with the way Minnesota looks against San Francisco, I'm a little worried they're starting to put it together. And there's better than us right now, and I just think they're a better football team than the Packers, and I would expect them to win this game.
So you're saying our defense isn't as good as San Francisco's?
I know that's a very hot take, but yeah, I think I'm saying that. But anyway, thank you so much, listeners, for coming and listening. We know it's always tough when the Packers are struggling, but we appreciate you coming and commiserating with us, as we'll say. But we'll be here, win or lose, after Sunday's game, talking about how the game went, hopefully after a win. But come give us a follow on Twitter at FatherSonPackers so you don't miss when that episode comes out. Like we said, we tweet out when we have new episodes, articles we find interesting, pieces of data we find interesting, et cetera, and subscribe to us on your podcast platform of choice, whether that's Apple, Google, Spotify. We even put all our episodes out on YouTube, like we said. Come subscribe to us there. It would really help our numbers. Thank you again so much for listening. 2 episodes a week the rest of the year, 1 episode a week over the off season. And until next time, go Pack Go.
Go Pack Go.